It was probably my favorite card throughout the whole tournament. Probably the Codex of Inertia too, just because I met so many Icelanders. It was probably one of the most painful cards to take out of my list. It's not like just chose her for the Nationals entrance, but I've only been playing Lexi in CC since Tales of Aria.
Welcome back to Draw 4, your best Flesh and Blood resource. Today we are welcoming the new 2023 Norwegian National Champion, Tov Hanssen. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's been such a long time since I've seen you last time, so it's an absolutely amazing opportunity to be here with you.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you here and talk to you about your experience at Nationals, but also about your strategy and your deck list, because you won on a very, very known and very heavy hero. Tell us a little bit about your choice on your deck at first.
Yeah, I chose Lexi for my Nationals entrance. It's not like just chose her for the Nationals entrance, but I've only been playing Lexi in CC since Tales of Aria. It was my first deck when I entered the game, so it's just like my pet deck, where it's the only character you want to play because it got you into the game. Yeah.
It is even better that you won on her because you know her for so long and now you got the chance to take her to the top. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to play like the Ice Fuse list, and then there was like the No Fuse list, and the mix between Ice and Lightning. There's been so many decks to try out. Yeah.
You already mentioned that we got to know each other in person already at the pre-release event in Madrid. So yeah, from then a lot of time has passed, but you are very consistent in your Flesh and Blood games till then, right?
Yeah, here in Oslo we play 2 to 3 times a week, like armories and on-demands. So yeah, there's a heavy community here.
So how big is the community at your locals and in Norwegian in general?
We might not be like the biggest community, but we're like very consistently like 10 to 20 persons at like the armories. So there's always a huge variety of different decks, different strategies. Yeah, it's really cool.
And at Nationals, how many players were attending there?
At our 32-person capped Nationals, there were 39 people. Yeah, it was a bit problematic, but our judge made sure we all got to play, so it was really good.
Oh,
he deserves huge applause for his sticking with the program, I guess.
All right, shout out to the judge then. That's amazing.
Yeah. Shout out to Magne.
What was the matter there at Nationals? What kind of heroes did you need to face?
I didn't actually face that a huge variety of heroes. My first match was a Icelander, where I chose to go first, and it was just like a super grindy game against a good friend. But we managed to take it at the very end. And for my second game, I also met a friend on Icelander. That was also a close game where we just battled and had fun and friendly banter. And before the draft, I met a Bravo player, which is also from the Oslo community. It was all friends, and it was also super, super grindy with a mix of mid-rangey, fatiguey Bravo. So, yeah.
Okay, and then the draft came up. Were you comfortable with drafting at Nationals?
I've been practicing a lot of Monarch draft, but I think it's really hard because you have all the ways to go. You can go Shadow, and then you can go to Chain, and you can go Levia, and you can go Light for Prism and Bolton. But I managed to be the only Chain in my 8-man pod, so I was kind of lucky there, I guess. I think my pod was 4 Prisms, 2 Levia, 1 Bolt-in, and 1 Lexi. No, Lexi, the Chain.
Okay. And did you win all of your games in draft?
I won 2 and lost the last to a really good friend.
Is there anything in particular that you want to share with the viewers for your draft experience at Nationals?
I think for the draft, it really just depends on your pool. Because I would say probably the most powerful deck from Monarch Draft is Prism, because you have so many ways to go. You can go the Protect the Queen Spectral Shield build, or you can go Spectral Shield Big Attack, yeah, or you can go generic Prism. So there's so many options, in my opinion. But if you get a really good Bolton deck or a really good Levia deck and are a good pilot, Chain 2, really good. It all depends on your pool, to be honest.
Yeah.
And of course, the player.
Sure. So even though the Norwegian community isn't that big, would you say it is like kind of competitive, or are there also more casual players?
It's really competitive. We always want to play our best. We have fun while doing it, so it's totally fine for me. Because we try to mix in a bit of blitz and some commoner, but it's mostly classic constructed people want to play.
So I know that there is a big, very competitive Nordic community surrounding like all the Nordic countries here in Europe. And I think that's really amazing to see that it is such a grab of spark that you try to not only compete in all of the countries, but then gather and share that knowledge and support each other and go to the bigger tournaments too. Did you follow the other nationals there too, or were you mostly focused on yourself at the weekend?
I tried to be focused on the others too, just to see what won, what was played, and how people did. I have a lot of friends from Sweden that plays Flesh and Blood, so just to follow up on how they do. So yeah, I try to follow the competitive communities of the other Nordic countries, also like all the other places in the world. But for this nationals, I was really focused on trying to do my best and trying to get that ticket to Worlds.
So before we also talk about later on your deck and the cards you choose, were you kind of going into the tournament with an expectation on rising up to the top, or how did you tackle nationals this year?
I was hoping for top 8 and like aiming for top 2 to get the ticket, but it was just like an amazing experience to see all my friends from all around Norway. That was probably like my expectation, just to see like all my good friends.
All right, then how did you feel when you got the message you can battle up against the other top 8 competitors?
I was really excited. When I saw that I went 4-0, I was like, okay, I think I'm in top 8. And then I won the 5th game and I was like, yes. It was just an amazing experience.
So then, before we show the viewers your deck list, let's evaluate a little bit more on the meta that you faced, because in top 8 you also had tough games that we also want to share with the viewers. Tell us more about your semi-quarter and then about the finals.
For my top 8, my first match was the Icelander from my second game. No, it was an Icelander from Stavanger, which I haven't met in the tournament yet. So I was like, okay, this might be exciting, because I had no idea what deck they were playing before I looked at their deck list. So that was really scary, but I think I had a good plan into the Icelanders. And for my top 4 deck, for my top 4 match, I met the Icelander from my second game, which also is really scary because they have played against me before in the tournament, so they both can see my deck list and they can play around like the previous experience. That was really scary and exciting at the same time, but then again, we're really good friends, so it's whoever wins. It's friends, so I wouldn't be mad if he won, and he wasn't mad that I won. It was just we finished all the games with like hugs and laughter, and yeah.
That's amazing.
And for my final game, I met the first national winner, Oscar, on Fi. And he has beaten me a lot of times on Fi. It's probably one of the decks I was more scared of in the Nationals, just because his deck is really punishing to me. Yeah, that was probably one of the scariest matches to go into.
Did it turn out to be that scary then when you faced him already?
No. I was kind of lucky. We were both really fatigued from the tournament. He wasn't lucky and made a few mistakes, and Lexi just did Lexi things. Yeah.
There are quite a few powerhouses inside of the deck, and I think that's the time that we actually share and talk about your deck list.
Let's go.
Okay. Before starting off with all of the cards, are there any key cards that you want to mention at the beginning that really stood out to you in the tournament?
I gotta go with the Trench. It was probably my favorite card throughout the whole tournament. It makes the Bravo matchups easier because they're going for the Warmonger and trying to stop the game, and also with the Icelanders, which trying to tax you, but you can just bottom a card and use that to pay for the effect. Or yeah, it's truly the MVP in my opinion. And of course, Codex of Frailty.
Yeah. These two cards were, you would say, the most standout stars at this Norwegian Nationals for you.
Yeah. And probably the Codex of Inertia too, just because I met so many Icelanders.
So Codex of Inertia we saw in quite a few lists throughout the national season. How did you come up to put Codex of Inertia then into your deck?
So before the whole nationals started, I tried to make my own list of what I think people are going to play, since we are so close, and I played a lot of Icelanders, so it was like many of the lists run like one Codex of Inertia, and I was like, I think there's going to be a lot of Icelanders or Bravos that I would love to have the Inertia just to force their arsenal away. So that's why it's a 2-off for my deck at least.
All right. I think it's really interesting to see also because I only yesterday interviewed the national champion from Denmark, Simon Nielsen, also a very well-known Magic player. And he is playing kind of a different list, but also managed to win nationals with this list. So I think even though I would totally agree with you that Trench at the moment is a really, really interesting and powerful card, there are a few ways that you can tackle Lexi, even though when you don't want to play Trench. How did you come up when you switched to Trench? When looking at your deck list here, you don't even include Fjarnal Spring Tunic into the deck list for Nationals.
It was probably one of the most painful cards to take out of my list, because Tunic is just free resources every 3 rounds, or you can just like save it, and if you say go again with your last arrow and you have Tunic, you'd never know if it's like an arrow, if it could be anything. And it's also really good into Icelander when they try to tax you to pay 1 at the beginning of their turn. But I think my reason for the Trench is only because I knew that there was going to be a lot of Bravo players and a lot of Icelander players, where those are my like main card anyway. So I kind of went around that and said, okay, I think we are good with only Trench, And from a few tests and practices before the nationals, I found out that, in my opinion, I get more resources from the trench than I do of a tunic, because like the Lexi games are really fast. If you're into an aggro matchup, you maybe get 1 or 2 counters from your tunic, while with trench you can always go for that double arsenal. You can like just sync it out and gain that resource. Yeah, that's probably why it's like my main deck.
So it not only makes your deck a whole lot of cheaper, but also a lot more better and resource-wise when it comes to attending nationals. And it is really interesting for me to see here now too that depending on the meta that you are in, you can really think out complex and creative ways of tackling that meta in your nationals or your local scenes, because it varies from place to place. And so we are seeing different lists here throughout national season, but that is of a reason. And it is very exciting because you already mentioned you also want to go to Worlds, and they're kind of all of these different metas coming together and forming the World Championship meta, and then it is really important to tackle that exact meta. So we will for sure see us at Worlds. I'm very excited for that one, but now let's jump into the other cards of your deck list, starting with the equipment.
Yeah. We of course have the Hornet Sting, because sadly we lost our bullseye bracers. I guess it's really fair that we lost them, but Hornet Sting is still really nice because you can deal 1 damage on their turn while blocking, so you kind of get plus value out of it, and you get to see your top card. And for example, I like to use, if I don't have to use my Hornet Sting for a breakpoint, I like to use them before a Tree of a Kind, just make sure I draw an arrow or make sure that I don't draw an non-attack action. Hornet Sting is actually really good, even though I miss my bullseye bracers. And then we have also the auto-include New Horizons. I don't think there's really much to say other than it's really strong having 2 arsenals. And also Quiver of Resting Leaves is probably like in everyone's main deck at the moment. I think it was really cool seeing the Abysmal Depth at the beginning where the Fatigue Oldhim deck were played, but after the heavy Fatigue is out of the meta, Quiver just... When you lose Bullseye Bracer and you still have the opportunity to get like the 3rd arrow in, even though you didn't have one in the arsenal, it's really, really strong.
Yeah. I think that one is also an auto-include, right?
Snapdragons, of course. I also have the Push Grapplers in my sideboard.
Yeah.
Just for the Bravo and Katsu Fi matchup, as well as the Shock Charmers for my arms. I think both of them are just really, really strong.
So your sideboard we will also talk about a little bit later on, but I think if you don't want to include anything else for the equipment, we can jump to your main deck.
Yeah, I think we can jump straight to. I don't think there's much to say about Voltaire other than it's probably the only arrow or the only bow you're running. I think the same goes for with the Bolton shots. There is just like an auto-include in every Lexi deck where it's just really powerful to start off with a Bolton shot and say, hey, do you want to block 5, 4, or like 3? Or do you want me to gain the 3rd arrow I didn't have? Bolton shot's truly an MVP of the deck.
And Drill Shot I think is really interesting here because you're including 1 blue card also in your main deck.
Yeah.
What is your reason behind including 1 blue in your main deck?
It's kind of sideboard, but I just found out I like to have the extra blues just in case. And for my matchups, it wasn't auto-include because I met a lot of Bravo and a lot of Icelanders. So I just had it in the main board, even though most people would probably say it's a sideboard card, but it made my deck go up to 16 blues, so that I could have the extra blue if I needed it for the quiver. Yeah. So I don't think I needed 3 of them, so I just went with the 1. It's also a really annoying arrow to say, hey, do you want to give me a card, or do you want me to put a minus counter on that equipment? So, really strong card.
And Endless Arrow is a staple too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just probably one of the more powerful arrows in the deck, at least against like fatigue matchups where they want you to run out of cards, so they have to block it. And for 4 go again, you have to give either 2 cards, or if you're lucky to have a defense reaction or equipment with a card, etc. It's just so good. And now with the codexes too, it's so easy to just throw them out, because earlier when you were playing like the Ice Fuse, you had to like save them and not lose them because it was always your 3rd attack. So yeah, Endless is just a powerhouse of a card.
Yeah. You have quite a few different arrows in your deck that most of Lexi lists that I saw are including, but is any of the major arrows that most of the Lexi players are running standing out to you?
Before I didn't like the hamstring shots until it's just like, it's kind of a frostbite on a arrow without fusing. It just got into my deck. It was just, it gave too much value for me, and it's always an awkward block, either 5 go again or 6 straight up. So even for the fatigue matchups where they want to keep 1 card to maybe swing with hammer for 4, if that hits, they can't keep 1 card to do it. Absolutely a really good card for Lexi.
And 2 is also the ratio that in your testing came up the best?
Yeah, I didn't think I needed to see them that much, and I wanted to include more poppers for my deck, so I cut down to 2 instead of 3. I was testing with 1, but then I felt like I didn't see it that often, so 2 was like the spot where I liked it.
But you didn't face any draw mice in Nationals, or were there 1 running around?
I didn't face a single draw mine. There got 1 into top 8, if I don't remember wrong. I think we were 5 draw mice at our Nationals, okay. 5 or 6. And I was lucky enough to not meet one of them.
Yeah, so I was also at the German Nationals last weekend, and Dromai won German Nationals, a local player from my place, and he destroyed every Lexi that he faced in the tournament. So I am very curious on your way of seeing Dromai when being a Lexi player.
Against Dromai, usually I'm not that scared because I've switched out to a bit more poppers and frost effects. But the big dragon Dromai is always the scary one. When that Tumultai comes and take your New Horizons, it's not a fun game.
So when we scroll down a bit, we see also the card that you already mentioned, Codex of Frailty. But is there any particular card that you want to start here with the bottom part?
I think we can start with the Codex of Frailty, just because it's just a really amazing and kinda overpowered card for Lexi. Because at the start, when we got introduced to the Codex of Frailty, I think most of the Uzuris were the one that like really got the value out of it, because they could get like the Leave No Witness and just have a 1 card for take a card from your hand and then threaten to take that arsenal away. But with the heavy damage and utility Lexi can do with it, it's just really a frightening card. And you even get like an arsenal after, so you're never really scared to use it. It's not like I have to arsenal this and set up for my next turn. It's just it's a powerhouse.
Yeah, so Frostlock I think is an interesting card too, because for some Lexi players it is pretty unusual to fuse this card. It doesn't come up that often, but how do you see Frostlock in your deck?
I really like it, just because for like aggro matchups where I'm already running like more ice cards, it's easier to fuse, and it's a devastating on hit for a lot of the small cost cards that aggro decks run. And also for the fatigue matchups where people want to use their defense reactions, but they get taxed one more. It's not that much about the on hit then, it's only taxing them for trying to block, and it's just really strong. So it doesn't matter if it's fused, and for 4, it can be for 3, or yeah, really, really strong card.
You have an ice card in your main deck though that I want to hear how did it come up in the tournament.
The Winter Spite are like, it's such a powerhouse in itself, just because you can't tax them one card when they probably don't want to. So if they didn't even want to block, they kind of have to give you a card anyway. And if you manage to arsenal it and flip it up to give them a Frostbite and tax a card from their hand, it feels so mean playing the card, just because if you get the Frostbite and you take a card and makes their turn even more expensive, yeah, it's a nasty card. I even tried to run out with the yellows, but then again I felt my 3 of a kind turns had more turns with attack actions. No, non-attack actions instead of attack actions.
Okay. Also a card from Tales of Aria. When first seeing this card, did you think it would stick around for that long?
I actually did, just because for me I was like a Lexi player, so it was always an auto-include for diffuse decks.
Yeah.
But if you were not running like diffuse, or you're running the hybrid, it was also just an auto-include because it's a blue card you can pitch for arrows, or it's just like a blue you can keep, give Frostbite and tax card, and then start your turn with arrows. So it was just like, it's a really, really strong card in itself, even though it doesn't need to fuse anything, it doesn't need to do anything else than the card does.
Alright. Is there any other card you want to touch on in detail here?
I think everything is fine so far. Remorseless is just like one of the best cards for aggro matchups, and even for the fatigue matchups. If they try to save defense reactions in their arsenal, they can't use it, and even though they just swing with 1 attack later, it costs them 1 life. So it's always like, it's never a card for 1 for 5 or 1 for 6. It's 1 for 7, 1 for 8, 1 for 9. So it's just a strong card.
Any of the other cards that you want to go over here?
I think the other is kind of self-explanatory. Like, all the Lex decks run 3 of a kind. Searing Shots is just like probably the best value-wise in any deck. I think we're good there.
Then let's come to your sideboard. And the first one in your sideboard is 2 Arctic Incarcerations in red.
Yeah. It's just a really good card to end your turn with if they are choosing not to block. It's then really devastating if they choose to take all the damage and then they still have to pay through 3 Frostbites. Or if you have blocked with your whole hand and you want to turn the tempo and say, hello, your turn will be really devastating and a really good way to turn the aggro matchups.
But with 2 also in the tournament, you didn't really feel like you needed a third one.
No. I was not so scared for like the super aggro matchups. I knew that we didn't have that many 5 players or Katsu players or Briars, and I didn't think we were going to be that many Lexis, but we turned out to be a few Lexis. So just to have 2 was enough, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You don't want to take too many arrows out of your deck.
Speaking of arrows, The big popper arrow here is battering bolt, and you included 3 of those.
I included 3 of them. It's a really good card value-wise. It's a... For Lex, it's kind of a 3 for 6, because you have to pay 1 for the Voltaire. But it's an arrow you can shoot, it's a popper, and it's really good into the fatigue bravos. Because when you come to the late game and you choose to remembrance cards in your deck, I mostly choose battering bolts, because you can plus them, so they come for 7, so you can't cleanly block them, so you always leak some damage. And if they're unfortunate to let it hit, or something like that, or take a defense reaction when they don't want to use, yeah, it's a powerhouse of a card.
And CNC is also a very well-known card, but you included 2 of those. Did the Command and Conquer come up in the tournament in any particular way?
I tried something out where I tried to take them in against one of my friends that played Icelander, but it didn't really come up for me in a crucial way in the tournament. It's just a really good card. It's really good into Lexi. It's, yeah, a good popper. It's like double beneficial. You can pop with it, or you can threaten an arsenal. So it's multi-value. A really good card.
And Down and Dirty, it's very interesting, because some lists that I saw didn't include Down and Dirty, but how was the card for you? And
for my nationals, I didn't actually get to play it once, but the reason I included is the awkward thing about having too many poppers is you can't arsenal them, so they clog your hand when you're drawing up cards. And Down and Dirty just says, hey, do you want to pop from your arsenal? Sure, go ahead. So it's probably one of my favorite poppers against the Dromai.
Yeah.
Or even the Prisms.
Icequake, though, is something interesting that I also saw in other lists. How did you manage to pull out Icequake in the tournament?
I got to play Icequake for my 5 matchup in the finals. It was kind of my winning card. Icequake is, again, a nice card that lets you give them Frostbite if you flip them from Arsenal. It also gives +3 to maybe a weaker arrow. You can shoot a blue arrow, still threaten a breakpoint. And it's just a devastating on-hit where all your arrows give Frostbite. I thought it was a worthy include, even though it costs 1, which I saw many lists went with the Premeditates instead for a buff. But Icequake really put in the work.
Also a fuse card, so
it's a fuse card.
There. How about the other cards in your sideboard? You already mentioned Codex of Inertia as one of the MVPs, but how about Withering Shot?
Withering Shot, for me, I knew that there was going to come a really good Katsu, and it just gave me so much value against him when we practiced and when we played in armories or on demand, and of course for the Lexi matchups, because there's nothing more devastating than playing Codex of Inertia, giving Codex of Frailty and giving a Frailty token and getting another Frailty on hit. You just turn off their turn if they wanted to keep their hand. It's a really scary arrow for Lexis and people that care about their weapon. I even take it into Fatigue Bravo, just because if it hits, it's not like an arrow that the Bravos care to block out, but if they keep 1 card to swing the hammer, it hits for 3, so you can clean block it with 1 card. In my opinion, a really, really good arrow.
When we look at Codex of Inertia, do you want to include anything about that card at the end?
Codex of Inertia, like Codex of Frailty, is really powerful, but it's kind of the more budgety, risky card, because there is no guarantee what you draw unless you try to pitch stack which in many matchups you will not get a chance to do. You have to kind of put your faith in your deck and hope there's a red arrow or something to tax the player with. My Codex of Inertia were like only into the Icelanders and Bravos, where I didn't really care what I got from them. If I got a 0-cost card that I could shoot, super. But if I didn't, I knew at least they would not have an arsenal for the next turn.
All right. The last card that we didn't talk about yet is One Remembrance.
Yeah. I don't like Remembrance because in so many ways it doesn't block. We have had so many talks about it in Norway that Remembrance go against. You have this 60 card deck, you're playing that 60 card deck, but this adds 3 more cards, or 2 kind of, because you play that to get 3 cards. Yeah. But it, in my opinion, is super necessary if you're going up against either Icelander or Bravo, where Bravo is trying to fatigue you and I want my Codexes of Inertia back, or I want to shuffle up my deck against an Icelander so that I don't hit like that all blue if they're trying to slow down the game and get me to my blue rotation. So for these nationals, it was a real lifesaver. Absolutely.
All right.
And even for like Icelander, when they play, we had a lot of Channel Bleak expanse in our meta. And just to save in those 3 for kinds, get another power turn in case they try to time all their Channel Bleaks to ruin 3 for kind turns. Mm-hmm. It's just really good to can include 3 for kinds again for later rotation, or if you're lucky enough to draw them straight up ahead.
Do you think you would include more Remembrance depending on the meta?
It really depends, because I think 1 is enough at the moment. But if we get like a super fatiguey dash with the new set coming out, there might be coming more, but I really don't like to take out arrows and take out other power cards for a card that just lets you play them again.
Do you want to include any information about Perch, Grabblers and Shock Charmers at the end?
Perch Grapplers is purely for the block. So if there's... I use them into some of the aggro matchups. I tend to mix them into Lexi matchups where I know that I might not be able to like trick in a 4-arrow turn or set up for that super wide turn where I can choose to like give a card and Perch Scrabblers to block out a devastating on hit instead. It's purely there for block.
I mean, you already praised on Shock Charmers.
It was my favorite include into Icelander, and Icelander only, where I didn't want to run AB2, just because I don't feel like I have the blues to be pitching 2 resources away all the time. I try to stick to either sinking a card with Trench and pay for 1 AB, or just give a red card I didn't care about. Or if they go really wide and have a lot of resources, give a blue. But for the pop-off turns that Icelander can come with, it was really amazing that I could like block out a crucial card for the late game. So it's always having 2 more life against a Icelander. And you don't have to pay for it, so it's, yeah, free AB.
It is interesting because in a few hours I will also talk to the Polish national champion, the Kano player. And he already mentioned that he also faced Shock Charmers, so I'm very interested in hearing his view there on Shock Charmers.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you your opinion on a card that you didn't include in your deck, because I know that it is a very important card for other deck lists, and that is Art of War. What do you think about that card, and would you include it in any way in the future in your deck?
I took it out of my deck right before the Nationals. I used to play with it forever, because it's just such a powerhouse of a card where you can filter your hand, you can draw more cards, you can give plus. It's a really, really good card, but in my opinion, I felt that sometimes I had to give away too many red arrows to draw 2 cards, and there could be double blues or a non-attack action. I felt always trying to consistently have 1 card in arsenal and maybe 2 arrows to shoot was the better play for me, at least, and not gamble with Art of War.
All right. Do you want to include anything here before we close the deck list?
I don't think there's much more to say other than I'm very looking forward to see if she makes it to Worlds. She is really close to becoming Living Legends. Hopefully I get to play her in Worlds one last time.
Let's hope for that. So that is a topic I want to ask you also. Going on in the near future, we will have Bright Lights as our next set, focusing on Mechanologist. And as I heard from you now, you're looking forward to playing Lexi again as long as you can. But how are you seeing the next set and going forward with Lexi here?
So far, there's not really much that information out about the Bright Light set, but the Mechanologist is like just a few cards away from being like super scary. They're already scary with how wide they can go or how defensively they can go, so it's going to be a cool and really scary deck or set. Yeah.
So I would love to see you playing Lexi at Worlds, and I would even love to see Lexi coming to the finals or even winning the World Championship. So far, Tales of Aria was like so powerful. Briar made the Pro Tour win. Olden made the Pro Tour win. Lexi is so dominant this year in the meta, and it would be lovely to see like all Tales of Aria heroes winning a major big tournament and then going off to Living Legend. But in case you can't play Lexi, do you have a second choice for a hero that is out at the moment?
It's I'm a huge ranger nerd, so it's even if it's good or not, it's probably going to be a ranger, either Azalea or Riptide. It's going to be ranger at least.
All right. Coming to the end here, I want to ask you the last question, and that is, do you want to shout out anyone?
Of course, I want to shout out the whole Norwegian community for being so supportive, and just it's not like only a community; it's a big family. I think we're like between 14 and 20 people going to the Barcelona event, so I'm just looking forward to spending time with the Fab family. I also would like to into the game. He bought me the Blitz starter deck for Lexi, and he does some really cool altars. So he's painted my, let's see if I have them here. He painted my Purge Peppers, which I used in the winning game.
It looks amazing.
Yeah, and he's now working on 3 Command and Conquers for me, so just managed to get ourselves a playset each.
That's great.
So yeah, and of course a huge shout out for the judge at our nationals for keeping his head cool and doing an amazing job with the event.
Yeah, I hope that judge pulls a lot of cold foils in his next packs.
Yeah, me too.
Tov, thank you so much for taking the time, giving us all these insights on Lexi and you winning at the Norwegian National Championships. And I want to also thank all the viewers for sticking around for so long. If you haven't already, check out Simon's decklist on Lexi if you want to get another view on it. And Tov, do you want to say anything here at the end to the community?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see as many as you in Barcelona as possible. And yeah, I'm just all super stoked about Nationals, and I'm so looking forward to the experience in Barcelona with everyone.
All right, me too. And we will tell the story there for sure. So see you there.